The Idol Hero Songstress by DrgnMstr. Chapter 3 Hitting Rock Bottom. Now, I do want to say that before we start this episode that the author saw fit to leave a note that there's a major trigger warning for this episode. There's going to be some serious talk of depression. Vague suicidal thoughts will be brought up, and they made sure to mention that it's a tearjerker, so if you're anything like me, have some tissues nearby. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the chapter. Midoriya Inko tried to be the best mother she could for her son Izuku. She had known for a long time that he needed help, but one undeniable fact existed in their family. In order for her son to receive the help he needed to cooperate. He was never violent toward other children, regardless of what his middle school staff told her. The last time they complained about her Izuku starting a fight, she asked for proof. They dropped their allegations and backtracked quickly after she issued that demand. They didn't make any other allegations, and that was when he first started middle school. Without proof either way, she could do nothing about that fight, or about the injuries that her son received on a regular basis. This didn't even consider the fact that the younger Midoriya was trying to hide his injuries from her. He even went so far as to use his allowance for medical supplies. She'd seen the receipts from the pharmacy, and when she asked him about it, he told her he was building a first aid kit as practice for being a hero. Her son seemed to forget she was a nurse sometimes, so she could tell from the itemized list what he was buying the supplies to treat, and the quantities involved made her worry even more. That was the rub of the entire situation. Inko knew her son well. She knew he held guilt over her husband's desertion of his family. She was sure that in some part of his mind, either his quirk or the gender question caused his father to leave them. Unfortunately, she couldn't deny it. She didn't realize that Midoriya Hisashi was a quirkist until that point, nor did he ever show any inclination over being overly macho. But the man she married was both, and he just couldn't handle the possibility of having a transgender child with a weak quirk. Thankfully, the only fight they had over that revelation occurred when Izuku was at school, and she made sure that the children were nowhere near when she confided this to her best friend Bakugo Mitsuki. She had thought she hid it well. But somehow, Izuku at least suspected the real reason for his father's disappearance from their lives. However, how he found out didn't really matter. What mattered was that it made Izuku reluctant to approach Inko with anything that would cause her to worry. He put on this mask of resolute cheerfulness around her that no amount of coaxing could break through. He refused to see counselors to help him sort out his gender issue, loudly and resolutely proclaiming himself to be a boy. He steadfastly refused to sing any song sung by a woman or girl, and only sung any other song when coaxed. It broke her heart for him to be so adamant about singing. She knew that her son loved music, and loved to sing, but the most he would do was hum when the urge grew too great. The inevitable result of his mask was that when Izuku really needed help, he would not only not approach her about it, but he would try to hide it from her. Any attempts to draw it out were met with lies proclaiming that everything is fine. She knew it wasn't. She knew her baby was suffering, and even an inkling as to who causing that suffering. She wasn't stupid, and the evidence painted a distressing picture. But without Izuku at least admitting to a problem, or without proof that would indicate he has a danger to himself or others. All she could do was let her son know she was there for him. So what if this made her cry too much, or made her seem a bit clingy? She was scared things were getting worse and was afraid of what it would mean for her precious baby. Just thinking of that filled her with dread, to the point where she had to do something. Izuku was due home soon anyway, so she decided to see what she had in her refrigerator to fix for dinner. In a sense of cosmic timing, she heard the front door open as she opened it. "Mom, I'm home," Izuku's voice announced into the apartment. Was there something off about the tone in his voice? She heard him remove his shoes, then his footfalls as he walked toward his room. Was it her imagination, or did they seem slow and ponderous? Maybe she was being influenced by her earlier thoughts about her son's life. Better find out for sure. "Izuku, honey, are you okay?" she called out as she stood up and walked to the open archway between the kitchen and the living area. Her son had made it to the hallway leading to the bedrooms before she had gotten to where she could see him. He was slouched over while carrying his book bag over his shoulder, and his head was down. Okay, so this was apparently not a good day. I'm okay, Mom. I'm just a bit tired is all. I'll just be in my room, okay? I just need to get some rest. Okay, sweetie, Inko replied, while trying to keep the mounting worry out of her voice. His stuttering was thick today. He normally didn't stutter much when it was just them. What do you want for dinner? I'm not hungry, the teenager replied. Was that a hitch in his voice? Oh, this is not good. Not good at all, Inko thought to herself. Instinctively, she reached out her hand toward her son. For him to refuse to eat with the other signs, maybe it is time to push the issue again. Izuku-kun, are you sure? I can fix whatever you want, she offered. The green-haired boy kept walking, finally reaching his door. She was finally able to see something besides his back, though it was only a brief glimpse as he didn't turn to enter until the door was already open. Yeah, I'm sure. I just need some rest, he replied before stepping in and closing the door behind him. Okay, his uniform looks like he took a dive into the sewer. His hair is wet and his cheeks were red. What happened to him? The overweight mother thought to herself as she reviewed what she saw. She also noticed that his hair was very dirty, which lent credence to him taking a dive into the sewers. But why would he do that? The sludge villain attacked Katsuki, right? So why did it look like it had been her Izuku that had been attacked? It was then, as she thought that one glaring detail stood out about her view of her son. The beginnings of a Midoriya cry was trailing down his face. And were there streaks of dark green running down that tree? These questions caused so many alarm bells to go off in Inko's head, she started to walk towards his bedroom door. But just as she took her first step, 4 solid knocks echoed through the house from the front door. Inko stood where she was for a moment, debating between going to look after her son or answering the door. 4 more knocks resounded throughout the house in quick succession, which caused Inko to sigh before striding to the front door to answer it. Whoever it was, she'd get rid of them as fast as she could. She had a son in trouble after all. Or, at least that's what she thought. On the other side of the door was someone Inko recognized immediately. One did not, raise a hero otaku without learning to recognize the major mainstream heroes. While she did not recognize the almost 2'9" chimera standing next to her, the woman was another matter. The black corset with the strap running up between her breasts over what looked to be a white leotard told her identity of the woman, as well as indicating she was not someone she could just brush off. Still, she had a son who may be in dire trouble, and she wanted to help him as soon as possible. Then again, this was a pro hero, so... Finally, the mother shook herself out of her head. Hello? She stammered out due to the stress of the situation. Can I help you? Midoriya-san, I am the pro hero Midnight. The human guest started even as she pulled out of her hero card to provide proof. Beside me is Nezu, she continued. I apologize for the intrusion, but can we come in? We need to speak to your son, Midoriya Izuku-san. Nezu also held out his hero card for the confused mother to take. Inko handed both cards back after giving them a quick inspection. Is he in trouble? She frantically asked as she stepped to the side and took a concerned step toward the hall. He didn't look well when he came home. What happened to my baby? She could feel her anxiety rise higher and higher as she watched the heroes walk in. Then, the song started to play, and she knew that her son had finally been pushed too far. A couple of minutes ago, Izuku tried to get to his room as quickly as possible. He did not want his mom to see him like this. She would blame herself and worry about him even more. And that was something he wanted desperately to avoid. But a part of him knew that effort was futile. He had heard her approach the entryway to the hallway and recognized from the proximity of her voice that she could see him enter the door to his room. Still, his precious few remaining hopes centered around being able to slip by his mother without her seeing his face, so he hoped he had pulled it off. He leaned against the door, his head bowed as he thought about his next move. His mind was whirling with thoughts and memories, all on constant playback. He remembered all the taunts that haunted him before he saved Bakugo now. He remembered his childhood friend's suggestion and looked in his eyes as he called Izuku a villain. He wasn't a villain. Villains hurt people for their personal gain or for their own personal satisfaction. He wasn't like that. But a tiny voice in the back of his head said, in a manner of speaking, the pain you brought your family could be considered villainous. He shook his head vehemently at that thought, thinking, no, I'm not to blame for what I am. I didn't choose this. All I want is to be a hero. Someone who saves everyone with a smile. I didn't choose to be useless. Tears were flowing down his face like waterfalls, as he felt something strain almost to the breaking point inside him. He could only manage to keep from screaming as he tugged his head upward. His mouth opened to let that scream out. But as he did, he saw the blurry vision of All Might in a dramatic pose. That poster had been attached to the ceiling because it was too big to be put on the walls. He felt his whole body shudder violently once, as if he tried to jump out of his skin. But there All Might was, standing over him, smiling triumphantly. In that moment, he thought he could feel the judgment of the man bearing down on him. Then that something within him broke. Izuku stumbled to his music player, his finger quickly strumming through various pre-Quirk songs. As if on automatic, he found the song he was looking for almost without consciously recognizing it as the same power that he felt when facing All Might, started bubbling up within him. Please, please let it stop hurting. Please make the pain go away. I don't want to feel like this anymore. Please. He remembered the words he sung to All Might and realized that, for the first time, he had no one left to turn to. No one would rescue him. Only his mother cared if he lived or died. Right now, he wasn't sure he even cared if. What happened to my baby? In the End by Linkin Park starts playing, but I'll read through the lines. It starts with one thing, I don't know why. He lost himself in the song at that point, only vaguely aware his quirk was doing something. He was immersed in flashes of memory, his ex-childhood friend pummeling him, assaulting him, burning him with his quirk. His soul felt like it was simultaneously on fire and slowly being encompassed in ice. Tears rolled down his face as he stood there, looking around the room at his All Might merchandise. Time is a valuable thing. Watch it fly by as the pendulum swings. Katsuki was also a fan of All Might. The blonde boy loved how All Might never seemed to lose. The man was pumped up to an undeniable, unshakable figure that became a symbol for the hopes and dreams of a nation. Images of All Might speaking on television, of telling people that anyone could be a hero, once again played through his mind, with the man's voice saying, "Except you," in the background. I kept everything inside, and even though I tried, it all fell apart. Izuku reached up and took an All Might figurine down from the shelf. It was a moderately expensive one. He remembered his mother getting it for him, out of the blue one day. Then his memory went back to Katsuki yelling that he was going to be the #1 hero to the class, that he was going to be the only one to get into UA. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end it doesn't even matter. This part of the song tore its way out of his throat, as the tears fell like a river and his head was thrown back by the very force of the words. An image of the blonde boy burning his shoulder as he threatened Izuku tore out of his mind and flooded the entire floor. Every person on that floor of the apartment building, except Izuku himself, was driven to their knees with the senses of pain, betrayal, and fear that infused that memory as they experienced it with him. He thought he could vaguely hear the sound of someone screaming his name, but he was too lost in his own memories to notice. In spite of the way you were mocking me, acting like I was part of your property. The song seemed to spur him on at this point, even as disparate memories of bullying episodes mixed with happier memories barely remembered from the time before his quirk came in. Interspersed with memories of Katsuki were images of All Might saving people with a smile, only for his deflated form to deny him his dream without so much as a thought. I've put my trust in you, pushed as far as I could go. For all this, there's only one thing you should know. It was this dream that had kept him from falling to despair throughout the years of betrayal, abuse, and disappointments. Images flashed through his mind, urging him forward to do something, anything, to ease the pain. He dropped the figurine to the floor by his feet, not even caring when he stomped on it as he made his way over to the walls where the posters hung. His hands reached up and started tearing them down, while he sung the song that was exemplifying his emotional state at the moment. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. As the song finally died down, Izuku could hear banging on the door. He just stood in the middle of his room, breathing hard and watching his tears pool at his feet. He could feel the next song in the playlist begin its lead in music. His door suddenly burst open as something small and white rushed over to the music player, successfully stopping the next song from starting its vocal cues. At the same time, he could feel 2 pairs of arms wrap around his shaking body. The energy that had started swelling up within him had nowhere to go. His body started violently vibrating as the arms hugged him tighter. He felt as if he was going to be torn apart by the music still playing on in his head, and he found he didn't much care.
It's okay, Izuku-kun. Can I call you Izuku-kun? We're here now.
The unrecognized woman's voice said. A part of him thought he should be able to recognize the voice, or at least the bits of costume he could see through bleary eyes. But her embrace and the strain of trying to keep his quirk from tearing him to pieces didn't give him much opportunity to do so.
Shh. Oh, Izuku, my baby. Don't try to hold it back, sweetie. Scream if you need to. We're here for you,
his mother's voice said. Surprisingly, he didn't feel any tears from her face. Normally he would, for he inherited his need to cry from his mother. But it seemed as if she was determined to be strong, perhaps for just this once. Her strength, combined with the other woman's soft assurances, finally gave him a direction for the energy threatening to tear him apart. Izuku let out an ear-piercing wail that could be heard for blocks around. He was surprised he didn't deafen the people in the room with him. As the music within subsided, he slumped into their arms and sobbed as the women just knelt there supporting him. After some undeterminable time, he got his body under control just enough to feel numbness seep in. He couldn't move from that spot if he wanted to, but he could speak. In fact, his heart/brain to mouth filter seemed to be completely gone as he said,
I'm not worth it. Please leave me alone. I'm just a worthless Deku. From what I saw out there today, I would have to disagree with that statement, young man.
Another voice, distinctly male, but high-pitched for a male, countered.
A Deku would not have been able to do what all those heroes could not. You saved a life today. That is as far from being useless or worthless as you can get.
He heard his mother gasp in shock at that statement, but Izuku couldn't even bring himself to wince.
You're missing the point where I almost died from that same villain minutes before,
the depressed teen replied somewhat bitterly.
If All Might hadn't intervened in time to save my life, then Bakugo would never have been attacked. I was powerless to stop that sludge villain then. Did you see it coming?
The unknown woman asked.
Or were you ambushed? Even pro heroes would have had difficulty if they were ambushed by that villain. And from the sound of things, what happened with your quirk today was new. I bet you didn't even know what you were doing when you did it, right?
Izuku could only nod in agreement into the female's shoulders. With tremendous effort, he struggled to stand up, separate himself from them, and make his way to his bed. His body felt like it was made of lead. It took all his effort to make it, so he was unable to control his fall onto it as he moved to sit down on it. He wrapped his arms around himself and kept looking down. He did not want to see the judging stare of All Might in the moment. Normally, when 2 heroes like Midnight and Nezu were to come to his room, he would be both embarrassed and excited, especially now after his destructive episode. All the hero merch, especially centered around All Might, was something that he was simultaneously proud and slightly ashamed of. He knew he was a fanboy, but his room could portray him as a stalker. However, at this point, he was too tired to care. He missed the way Midnight glanced around the room once, then ignored it while she pulled a chair from his desk to set it facing him. He missed Nezu's more calculative examination of the room, followed by a single affirming nod. What he did not miss was Nezu climbing up onto the chair facing Izuku, nor the way Midnight sat on his bed, a respectful distance away from him. He had just registered his mother kneeling on the floor at his feet when he heard her ask,
Izuku, what happened? I know you don't want me to worry, but I promise you I will help you through this. Please, tell me. He looked to his mother, fully prepared to try to edit today's story, but paused as he looked into his mother's anxiety-filled eyes. He realized it was far too late to keep from worrying her. Yes, please tell your story, young Midoriya. We can only help you if you let us, and we do want to help you. The chimerical principal of UA prompted. Izuku had a feeling the creature knew a great deal more than what he'd know already. After sparing a glance towards Midnight to see her plea for him to let go and tell them what was wrong, Izuku realized there was no way to hide what had happened, but at the same time, okay, but I have a condition, he said quietly, as for the first time in a long time he met someone's eyes, trying to convey the importance of what he was about to say. After I finish, I want you all to listen to my request. Please. The principal sat there for a moment, as if carefully considering the boy's words. Then, with all the solemnity of someone who understands just how weighty that request likely would be, he nodded once. I will listen, and as long as it is not harmful to yourself or anyone else, I will make an effort to grant your request, if it is in my power to do so. Izuku simply nodded tiredly. It will be, but... The depressed teen shook his head a few times and gave his mother an apologetic look. He was sorry for what his tale was going to do to her life, but for the first time, he let go of his doubts. I'm sorry, but to convey the full extent of the story, I have to start my story several years ago. What followed was a condensed story of his childhood. He told them about the arrival of his quirk, what the doctor said, what the quirk counselor said, and what his teacher said. He only briefly touched on his feelings about his own gender, mostly in conjunction with Bakugo's taunts. He told them about the increasing levels of bullying over the years, finally culminating with that day's events. He didn't hold back about Bakugo, and he definitely caught the undertone of growing fury in his mother's eyes. He knew it wasn't directed at him, but he was glad he put that condition in place. The two women gasped when they heard him relay Bakugo's remark about jumping off the school roof. Silent tears rolled down Inko's eyes, while a glance towards Midnight saw her saddened yet comforting expression. He couldn't tell what Nezu was feeling. He almost faltered there, but he knew if he stopped, he wouldn't be able to start again. So he told them all about the events of the day, the sludge villain attacking him, his rescue, his conversation with All Might, the second sludge villain attack, and finally confronting All Might himself. The only thing he left out was the reveal about All Might's weakness, but he thought he saw an approving nod from UA's principal when he skipped that part. Finally, he was done. He felt drained and slightly deflated as his tears had slowed down to a trickle. He'd have to change his bed sheets later, and maybe flip the mattress. It was wet. As he sat there, he began to notice the silence in the room. It kept building until he looked up towards the faces of the adults surrounding him. Each adult held something different in their gazes, with at least one element of surprise within each. Overall, from the two heroes he expected sympathy, if not outright pity, maybe some outrage and concern. And while the pity did not appear to be present, he could see some pride in Midnight's gaze, as if she were maybe proud of him. He didn't understand that look.
With Nezu not being technically human, Izuku had accurately guessed that reading his true emotional state was sometimes difficult. Yet he could tell the Chimera was profoundly disturbed by what he heard, and he could practically see his thoughts of roasting several people over the coals. He expected his mother to break down into wailing sobs, and perhaps even faint during the revelation of life away from home. She often appeared to take Izuku's hardships as personal faults. Looking back upon that fateful night of his medical exam at age 4, he could see now that her apologies were from a profound sense of failure. He couldn't yet figure out what that meant for her mentally. He was too busy trying to keep himself together. But what surprised him most about her reaction was an intense look of rage burning behind her motherly empathy and caring. Izuku knew easily enough who that rage was directed at, and he feared what it would mean for her life if he didn't get to his request.
I requested earlier that you listen to my request after I tell you everything.
The survivor started, splitting his attention between his mother and the principal.
I am not so foolish as to believe I could shield Bakugo from all the consequences of his actions, but I don't want him to be denied a chance to be a hero. I ask that he be allowed to be admitted into the hero course at UA, provided he passes like the rest of us. He doesn't bother looking at Nezu for the moment. Instead, he looks to his mother and practically begs. And, Mom, please don't let this destroy your friendship with Aunt Mitsuki.
There was a moment of profound silence as the adults looked between each other before Nezu responded, his voice softer than before.
Midoriya-kun, UA has a strict no bullying policy, even, or especially, for reminiscence. With years of bullying, aggravated assault with a quirk, and illegal quirk use among other various crimes, I don't see how I could possibly allow him to enter UA. We have a duty to the public. We can't afford to fail them. But that's just it, Nezu-san.
Izuku argued, as a look of determination grew on his face.
It's not entirely his fault. He became like this.
He quickly put his hands up and began to speak really fast.
I'm not blaming his parents. I know that they did not teach him to look down on people weaker than him. That was the staff of the elementary and middle school. And no one ever told him bullying was wrong. The teachers either turned a blind eye to it or gave recommendations. He needs to be taught differently, not have his dream ruined. That is a very mature viewpoint, Midoriya-kun,
Midnight said with a slight smile on her face.
The fact remains that he did make the decisions to act out, though. So he does share some of the blame, and should be held accountable. I'm just giving him a chance. No one gave me.
The middle schooler replied as his cheeks turned bright red from the compliment. It was readily apparent he was not used to receiving compliments. Nezu seemed to be quiet throughout Izuku's speech and his response to Midnight's observation. Finally, he nodded once.
Very well. I'll give him that chance,
the rat bear creature started.
However, there will be some conditions he will have to meet. But before I get to that, Midoriya-san, he says, turning his head to face Inko, would it be possible for you to transfer your son to a different school for the last parts of his middle school education? I would not recommend homeschool or online school. I had already decided to pull him out of the Aldera school system, his mother answered, her voice even and serious despite the tears rolling down her face. That did not bode well. His mother didn't often get angry, but when she looked and sounded like she did just then, the wise man would beg her forgiveness. Although I must ask, why not homeschool or online school? The UA principal turned his head towards Izuku for a moment and said, I know about your grades, but I'm willing to assume that those are doctored to make your bullies look better, yes? At Izuku's hesitant nod, he turned towards the boy's mother and said, I have become rather adept at recognizing such abuses of authority as that which I just described. So while I believe that your son is intelligent enough to complete a loser curriculum, those two options do not address a major concern I see here. Trust. To put it simply, I'm willing to believe that your son does not trust others easily, if at all. And such a tendency is perfectly understandable, if not almost inevitable, given what we have heard thus far. The Chimera pauses for a moment to take a deep breath before continuing. Your son has no reason to trust adults, or anyone really. I'm willing to believe the only reason we were able to get your son to open up to us today is a combination of his exhaustion from quirk use and the fact that we are heroes not normally associated with All Might. Correct, young Midoriya? At Izuku's nod, the creature continued. Your son needs to be in a positive learning environment where people will not only not hurt him, but are willing and able to be fair to everyone, especially him. And Izuku-san, you need to give others a chance to prove themselves to you. You need to find friends your age, or at least learn not to be so nervous around others. Do you understand? Izuku himself was terrified of starting somewhere new. At least in Aldera, he knew what to expect. In a new school, he wouldn't be able to accurately predict what others would do. And what would they think of his quirk? But what if they don't like me? He asked haltingly. If I went to online school, I could relax and maybe prepare for new people when I get to UA? Apparently that last statement confirmed something to the principal, for he seemed to momentarily smile before growing serious again. Young Midoriya, do you honestly think any kind of self-preparation would help you in meeting a bunch of people who are powerful young people striving to become heroes? Can you tell me with absolute certainty that you could put the amount of trust into your teachers at UA, who are all pros, required for training without practice first? Izuku deflated at those questions, knowing he was caught. I know it is scary, but you need time to heal first. There's no time in needing help and time to learn to trust again, Midnight gently said from her spot next to him. I had a very close childhood friend who was betrayed by authority figures too. Only it was not just his teachers, but his parents as well. They cut him off from everyone his age, forcing him to grow up isolated. It wasn't until he managed to get into UA that he was able to get away and get help. His scars from those times still run deep, and if there's one lament he had about being helped, was that he wished someone would have stepped in sooner, for many reasons. What happened to him? Izuku asked with a small sliver of hope in his voice. The R-rated hero smiled brightly and chuckled. He went on to become an amazing hero. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but I want to point something out to you. The first few months to a year after you leave an abusive situation is incredibly difficult. You will be on a roller coaster of emotions, And there will be days where you will want to shut out the world. You must fight through those thoughts, which is best done with people around that you care about. You'll find it much easier to find those people and work through your lows in middle school than you will at UA. The hero course is extremely demanding, physically, mentally, and emotionally. You really don't want to add to that stress to the beginning of the healing process. Izuku, work on that. Work on what you can before coming to UA, please.
Izuku felt his mother give his leg a tender, reassuring squeeze, drawing his attention to her.
Whatever you decide, sweetie. I think they're right. But it is your life, and you need to take the first steps. I will be here to help you, regardless of what you choose.
Izuku's chin fell to his chest as he let out a long breath. He really didn't want to be around people right now. He wanted to be left alone to digest everything. He deserved a break. Hadn't he suffered enough? How was going to a school full of new people who would probably think him a freak or worse yet, a weakling, going to help him in any way? If he stayed at home, at least he'd have the time to learn to be worthwhile. That thought made him stop to take a second look at his reasons for wanting to spend the remainder of his middle school time at home. Did he really just think of himself as worthless again? Wasn't he still thinking of himself as a weakling? A freak? An indecisive moron who couldn't make up his mind? Didn't these heroes just get done telling him that Bakugo and Aldera was wrong? Didn't he feel more hope and worth when they said that? Where would he get that if he stayed here, away from the world? Besides, a part of him wanted to feel worthy, liked again. He couldn't get that last part at home. His mother's love hadn't been enough before, and it definitely wasn't going to be now. He was smart enough, when he was honest with himself, to realize that, yes, he was scared. The outside world was a terrifying place where even your idols can let you down. He looked up and, for the first time this afternoon, looked around his room. He had grown up practically worshipping All Might, not just for his actions, but for the ideals he championed, which made today's meeting especially painful for him. But maybe he could believe in the image he carried of the hero before today, and not the reality behind the mask. No, it may not be the most healthy response, but would allow him to move forward.
Okay,
he finally said to the waiting adults in the room.
I'll give another school a chance, but I don't want to go back to Altera, not even for the transfer process. That was going to be my recommendation anyways, the principal said as his mother beamed and hugged her son. I will give your mother a list of schools that I personally recommend. And please don't let finances sway you, he says as Inko turned her head to him. There are some programs set up to relocate victims of abuse. They will be able to cover any charges you might incur. Moving on before Inko could object, he said, and that includes therapy sessions. I think we can all agree that young Midoriya will need a therapist, for a few reasons. What do you mean? Izuku asked hesitantly. Well, recovering from major depression and long-term emotional, psychological, and physical abuse generally requires therapy, Midnight interjects. Once given the go-ahead from Nezu, Nimeri turns her body a bit more toward the boy to appear more open. Overcoming social anxiety is another area you will need help in, particularly if you want to be a hero. That's what you're aiming for, right? Alright, y'all. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and even though I'm sick right now, I'm trying to do my best to keep up with stuff. I know I
missed a decent number of episodes that I would normally post, but I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Peace.